Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Armed Scholar Podcast. This is number 11. And on today's podcast, I actually have a really special guest. Most of you probably never heard of him, but he is someone who I've interacted with in my personal life. And I thought he would be someone who would be very interesting to you all, who has a very interesting background, and probably some very interesting insight that you guys will appreciate. So on this episode, I have Jeff Rockwell with me, and we're going to be talking about jiu-jitsu, firearms, competition shooting, all things and other things probably that will pop up as well. So thank you so much, Jeff, for being willing to come on the podcast and talk with me.
Oh, absolutely, man. Pleasure's all mine. Can't wait.
So why don't you go ahead and just kind of, I know who you are, but why don't you just kind of run through your background, things that maybe you think are important that people maybe find value in, so they can just understand, why I brought you on this podcast. Because I know why I brought you on.
Well, yeah. First, let me say again, I'm so happy to be on here. What you've been doing in the Second Amendment world here in the past few years is just amazing. So it's a big honor for me. Yep, my name's Jeff. I'm married, have 2 kids, and currently living in South Bend, Indiana. After living in Texas and Pennsylvania for a long time. My self-defense martial arts background, I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu under Tony Passos and the De La Riva lineage. I trained and taught for many years, which is how we got to know each other, which was fantastic back in Texas. As far as the shooting credentials, as they say, goes, I am a masterclass shooter in both USPSA and IDPA in several divisions. I shot 3-gun for a long time, pistol, rifle, shotgun. Got to be a semi-pro in the 3-Gun Nation League years ago. I'm a NRA pistol instructor, a Texas license to carry instructor. I worked as the lead instructor at a big indoor range down in Austin called The Range at Austin. Very, very creative name, but everybody goes there. It's a very nice facility, great people. And I'm currently still an instructor with a training group called Atomic Legion. They're based out of Austin, but I'm looking to expand that up here into Indiana. So a lot of martial arts training over the years, Thai boxing, MMA, Filipino martial arts and things like that, as well as the jiu-jitsu. But that was probably my main focus in this last decade. I still train some, but not as much as I used to because I'm so focused on the firearms. I get super addicted into one thing and super passionate about it. And that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. So for those who, you heard Jeff mention it. So I became aware of Jeff, or I met Jeff because when I was in Pennsylvania going to law school, I had done jiu-jitsu before and I was looking for an academy to train there. And I ended up training with Jeff at his academy, the Raptor Jiu-Jitsu there in State College. So I trained with him for 2-ish years. I got my blue belt from Jeff. Still a horrible blue belt. It's been way too many years, and I'm definitely one of those guys with the blue belt blues where I'm so sporadic in my training on and off. I'm back on now, but it's just
nice.
Yeah, it's one of those things. And even like you said, life happens. Even you, a black belt, you get into different things and you get hyper focused on those. And over the last few years,
I used to, be one of those jiu-jitsu junkies where it's like you if anybody was taking a break or had some distraction from jiu-jitsu, you thought that they were crazy. It's like, What are you doing? This is the most important thing ever. But then kind of you get a little older, you get a little bit more perspective, and there are other things in life, but it is a fantastic activity in martial art that just has so many benefits. But
yeah, so and that's one of the benefits I thought would be interesting to talk with you, because you have definitely gone down the rabbit hole with jiu-jitsu, and you now are definitely going down the rabbit hole with firearms and competitive shooting. And I got to kind of watch you, and it was interesting because when I first met you, I had no idea you had any interest in firearms. I think the only inclination I ever had was one day you were wearing a Pew Pew Life Colion Noir shirt to training.
Yes.
And I saw it and I was like, wow, because at that time in law school, I was very much into Colion Noir and was watching NRA TV stuff and his noir shooting stuff that he was doing on.
Those were great shows.
I love those. I told him the other day, he's like, you need to bring those back. You got.
I know. He's still doing good work, but but man, it's not the same.
Yeah. And so it was interesting. Like I saw you wearing that shirt, and I never asked you about it because also it's firearms, especially coming from California. It's one of those things that you don't talk about it that much.
Right.
You don't really know how everybody feels about it. So it was going to be awkward for me to be like, "Hey, you like guns too? Let's talk about guns." We were there to train. So, but that was the only inclination I ever had. And then, I left law school, left Pennsylvania, moved back to California. And then, continue to follow you on social media. And then I saw, you moved to Texas with your family and you started doing a lot of competitive shooting. I started to see you guys do, or you do a lot of that shooting content on your personal pages. And I was like, wow, like he's really into firearms, probably at least on the competitive side more than me. Like, I'm much more of a casual, go to the range, do my training there, but definitely not any competitive shooting stuff, which was really cool.
There's space for all of that, for all the different types of enthusiasts in the gun world, and that's one of the things I love about it.
So first, we'll take this in sections. We'll talk about the jiu-jitsu side first, and then we'll move to firearms. Okay. So first and foremost, like, how did you get into jiu-jitsu?
Man, well, I got into martial arts in general because as a 10 or 14-year-old kid, I wanted to be Bruce Lee. I saw Enter the Dragon for the first time, and I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I want to be able to, beat up 20 people, with my bare hands. And that was during the whole ninja craze back in the 80s. And so I thought that martial arts were amazing, and I wanted to get into them. And Bruce Lee's martial art was JKD, right? JKD Concepts, which was his way of, kind of almost like an early MMA blend was his idea, which at the time, at least in the United States, was a big deal. So when I went to college, there was a JKD Concepts club that was meeting on campus. I was like, I'm in, right? So I went and I started training with them on these little mats in a gym, and we did a lot of striking, we did some knife stuff, but part of what they did, the grappling side was jiu-jitsu. And the grappling stuff just seemed so amazing. And eventually you started to feel it's like you can actually make this stuff work. Like, this is real. Like, this isn't just this flowery thing. We're like, oh, well, if the person isn't cooperating, you can't do the move. Jiu-jitsu, you can still do the move. If you do it right and you have all the awareness of body placement, man, this stuff is really effective. And so that kind of started the journey for me as to that attraction to what I could feel was real and it would work against resisting opponents right away. And then I think my first jiu-jitsu official, like under a Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor, was maybe in 1998. Higan Machado came to Pat Trey's Trident Academy in Woodbridge, Virginia, which was close to where I was going to school. And I was, again, just completely blown away. Like, we thought we were pretty good. We were doing a little bit of jiu-jitsu, a little bit of like shoot wrestling with leg locks. And we thought we were pretty hot stuff. And man, Higan, of course, just it was one of those times like there were no black belts anywhere. There were a couple blue belts and a couple purple belts as far as the United States guys. But Higan just rolled with the 50 people that were there at the seminar. And he just lined them up against the wall and he just rolled with all of us, destroyed everyone, tapped us all like nothing. But even against like the blue belts, like the legit jiu-jitsu blue belts, I could do nothing, right? All of the stuff that I had already been working on, just with that club and these other things, I was powerless against their pins. I couldn't escape anything. My leg locks were useless, and I was like, man, this is something special. This is something different. I really need to get dedicated to that. So I started training with at Pat Trey's school down there under that Machado banner. And man, took a break here and there, but otherwise didn't look back for probably 15 years. And it was a crazy journey, but amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting for people who are kind of, you'd say 1998, you're talking early UFC. It was a lot different. You're just hearing people nowadays. Almost every town has probably maybe 2 gyms at least, even small towns, 2 gyms at least with black belt instructors, sometimes multiple. But I remember even when because I think I first stepped into a jiu-jitsu gym at like in 2009,
Mhm,
2010 maybe. And I remember my first instructor was also, he was a purple belt. And once in a while, the black belt that he was under would travel. And we thought that was like, oh my gosh, a black belt, like, whoa. And as time progressed, then the sport definitely now has grown, and the art has grown now to where you have multiple black belts. It's a thriving economy for a lot of jiu-jitsu instructors and training. But it's funny to hear, like, you were even way before that, when like even seeing a blue belt was probably rare.
Oh yeah, no, it was extremely rare. And like it was a purple belt was a ninja that was on a complete other level that you couldn't even think about. There were no brown belts, and the only thing, every now and then you'd get a black belt from Brazil, that to come by from a seminar, and that was it. But it's amazing how things have changed. And as you say, I taught in Austin for a number of years, and when I started, there were maybe 3 or 4 legit black belts in town whenever I was there in like 2009. And then by the time I left the first time in 2014, there were probably like 10 more. And then when I came back in like 2018, like it's just flooded. Like it's one of the meccas of jiu-jitsu.
Austin is the mecca.
People.
You got New Wave there with Gordon and Dan and all them, and the B team, and just everybody else. I think Tim Kennedy and his stuff's there.
Oh yeah, I came back in 2018. People are like, "Oh, you going to teach again? Teach jiu-jitsu again?" I'm like, "Who am I going to teach again?" It's completely crazy, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's grown to that phase. And a lot of that too was when Joe Rogan moved over there, and you saw a lot of people all of a sudden flood to Austin. It was big before that, but now everybody's there. I have a question for you. How long did it take you? Like, how long did you train from white belt to black belt? How long was that process for you? How long were you doing that? Because I'm sure it was a lot longer also back then, because it's hard to get promoted when there's one black belt in the state.
Yes. Man, I haven't tracked out the exact timeline in a while. But if I started in like 98, I want to say it was at least 10 years. I think it was at least 10 years. I took about a year off at one point, maybe nine months to a year off. Young man, personal life, drama type stuff. But my girl couldn't understand my fighter lifestyle, that kind of thing. But
jiu-jitsu is life.
Yeah, man, it is. Well, that's funny too, because I had taken some time off. Then I started dating who's currently my wife, Salima, and she was the one that encouraged me to get back into jiu-jitsu. She was like, "Oh, you really sound passionate when you talk about this thing. You should get back into it." I'm like, "Are you sure?" Because I get kind of crazy whenever I get in. She's like, "Yeah, you should do it." And then all of a sudden, a few years later, she's like, "Oh, I never see you. All you do is train." But yeah, I was kind of on that normal stereotypical, 8 to 10 year path. I think you can do it much faster these days if you're really dedicated. There's so much more information that's available. The instruction is so much better. The level of people they're getting really good really fast whenever you have the time and the focus for it.
Yeah, even just the resources on YouTube or instructionals now through like BJJ Fanatics. Like,
oh yeah,
I remember when I first started, I think the first instructional I ever bought was yours, but it was through like Artichoke Media. I still watch it once in a while. Go watch his instructional. I actually still use his sit up escape stuff that I stole from you and use still to this day.
No, man.
So
I'm so happy that I stole most of it from Marcelo Garcia, and then I added a few other things for that worked for me. But it's all about stealing it and then giving attribution for it, whether it's jiu-jitsu or guns or anything like that. Yeah. But the sit up escape stuff, man, that changed things for me in a big way. I wish I had gotten into that earlier. So good stuff.
So I have a general question. Like, how has jiu-jitsu impacted your life and maybe your thought process of life, and more specifically, I guess, self-defense, because, you know, that touches a little bit more on generally what I talk about on this channel with your Second Amendment right, or your, you know, fundamental human right or God-given right to self-defense. Like, how has that kind of changed your life or your thought process?
Yeah. Again, jiu-jitsu it's like magic in some ways, but it's also very revealing of reality. Like when someone puts their hands on you and is holding you or pinning you or doing something against your will, you feel that to your core, and it's very enlightening. And to slowly learn to become comfortable in that, and how to move your body, how to just naturally move your body to defeat that. It's extremely empowering, and it starts to shape, I think, for me, all the other things of self-defense. You know, you need to feel that energy. You need to feel what it's like to get hit. You need to feel what it's like to get grabbed and held, to get pinned. So you don't live with these fanciful notifications of or fanciful ideas of what the television, the movies show you. It's like, oh, you know, or these freaking con artists out there who are just like, oh, you know, the guy grabs you, just poke him behind the ear and he's gonna let go. Or, you know, you don't even have to touch him. You just, you know, use your chi to knock the person down. It's like you lose that illusion really quickly on a jiu-jitsu mat. Even against somebody who's being kind and gentle with you, they're going to be able to control you very, very easily. And so getting that dose of reality is super important for framing your self-defense mindset as to how vulnerable we are against people who are bigger and stronger, or maybe have some sort of training against on their favor. So you get that insight, but then you also get the confidence. We're like, okay, if I just do this little detail, this little movement, shift my hips this way, change this little angle, now I'm in control. Now they can't hold me. Now I can, maybe do something offensive against them. And you start to learn how effective it is, and that starts to build your confidence. So it's both that reality check of how vulnerable we are, but also that confidence of how strong and powerful we can be if we do this training and we put ourselves through this and we pay attention, and then we can walk around with the shoulders back and head high a lot more easily than living in a sense of fear where we don't really know what we can do, and we don't really know what anybody else can do. This kind of opens our eyes.
Yeah, I could say from my experience, which means nothing compared to yours, but
it means a lot. No,
when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, and it really was just on a whim because my little brother didn't want to play football anymore. So my dad said, well, he's got to do something. So he was looking around town for a judo gym, but there was no judo gym. There was only a jiu-jitsu gym run by a purple belt, and my little brother didn't want to go. So my dad was like, well, will you go with him? Like, he'll do it if you go with him. So nice. I started doing it. And the second, that's a purple belt, and purple belts still just absolutely wreck me, and blue belts still absolutely wreck me. Even some big, strong white belt wrestlers absolutely wreck me. It is the most humbling and terrifying thing to face that reality of, yeah, you might be a bigger, stronger male, but it really does not matter. There are people who will absolutely smash you if they want. And it's also very humbling then when you jump to that next level and you start training with people like yourself, and you just see how effortlessly they just kind of are flowing, giving you an opportunity to move and do. You are always very gracious, which I love, training with you and at your gym, because the culture was always very welcoming. But also there were times when you would smash us so we could feel it. But then you always also let us kind of work through positions and stuff that we were training. But it is a very humbling and ego check aspect of life that I don't think a lot of people ever really face, because especially now with social media, I think a lot of people walk around with inflated ideas of who they are, what they can do, and also a lot of people, are so used to engaging online and they forget like in the real world. And I know you said it gives you an ability to walk around and kind of know your own capabilities. I'm still in the phase of like I'm afraid of everybody because I still know that the weirdest looking nerd, female or male, could be an absolute just killer and just choke you out if they want.
Oh yeah, that's such the funny stereotype, but like these little nerdy looking guys and gals, but they've put the time in on the mats, like the Meow Brothers, whatever like that. They'll just murder you. But it's funny you said that, and that reminds me, we talked about mentioned Joe Rogan briefly, but he has a quote or a meme that's been up that I always love, but he's like, I don't understand how people who don't know how to fight get into fights. I've been training to fight my entire life, and I'm terrified to get into fights. and that's kind of what I take from it. It's like, man, it reveals the reality of it to you, and you're like, even if I win, I'm still gonna break my hand, or still get into a situation legally that I don't want to get into. But there is something in our culture where there are a lot of people out there who just haven't had that experience, but they think that they are really ready to fight, even though they've never really done it before. And jiu-jitsu is a great way to knock that idea right out of your head.
Yeah, and it's also one of those like how outside of doing other stuff or maybe doing like MMA matches or live sparring with boxing, jiu-jitsu, when you go and train, you most gyms you'll do a live session, live rolls at the end for 30 minutes or whatever, however long, how many rounds you do. And how often do people really get to do that? Like all out, technically kind of fight, grapple until someone quits and like, I know if I were getting to fight, I got like 3-4 solid minutes in me before I am gassed, just because the reality of like, I've grappled live with real people who also train and know what they're doing. I know I got 3 or 4 like solid minutes in me, and that's about it. Like maybe I can survive, but that's it. Which I guess would segue interesting into a question I have for you. Do you think more gun owners or people who carry concealed or just into firearms generally should consider doing jiu-jitsu or at least doing some sort of, martial arts self-defense to kind of also accompany them carrying a firearm?
Yeah, no, 100%. Absolutely. I used to teach a bunch of the Texas LTC classes down in Austin. And, I would kind of ask a show of hands. You'd have 20 people in the class and be like, okay, who's been in a fist fight before? Who's ever trained a martial art? Who's had somebody grab them, do anything? And most folks simply have not. And they are looking for the firearm to be some sort of magic talisman. Maybe they had some event in their life that scared them or somebody they knew did. And they're like, things are getting a little crazy. I want to go out and buy a gun. Right. And while I applaud them taking their self-defense very seriously and taking the responsibility on themselves as opposed to, waiting for the cavalry to come. If you haven't ever experienced what a fight is like, even in a controlled environment of a gym, I think it'll be a rude awakening if it happens to you, in the middle of the night in your bedroom or out on the street corner. And I've heard different instructors, say that, every gunfight is a fight first and foremost. It may not start perfectly with, the guy 10 yards away from you and he's reaching for a knife and I've got time to do my fast, concealed carry sub-second draw. I might have to fight to get to my gun. I might have to fight to retain my gun. That's a big reality that I think that a lot of people don't think about. And martial arts, it's just another tool in your tool belt, your levels of escalation. And you as a legal scholar, that the lethal force, there are elements to get to that have to be justified in order to do that. And if the only tool that you have is the gun, well, all you have is a hammer. Everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
You may be mentally just going to that tool too quickly, where you're not morally or legal in doing so. So whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's boxing, whether it's Muay Thai, whether it's a combination of all of them, having some sort of that realistic training and some other abilities other than just the shooting, I think is super important.
Yeah. And I've always been of the same mindset as well. And it's with a lot of stuff, the firearm, it is a great solution to some problems when it,
Yes.
there are specific problems that can only be solved with a firearm. And also, like, the firearm is the great equalizer for women, for
Yes.
weaker individuals. Like, there are situations where a firearm is absolutely warranted. That's why we have a right to self-defense. We have a fundamental right to self-defense. It's protected in the legal system, or by the Constitution. But not all, like you said, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And there are going to be, and I hear it all the time, there are incidences that come up, and we see it all the time also, like on Instagram or Facebook, where a situation pops up or a scenario pops up. And you don't want to be that person that automatically just goes to the firearm, because you will get yourself into a legal problem, because maybe that situation did not warrant you going directly to the firearm.
Yep.
And also, I think it's important, when you were talking earlier about like how jiu-jitsu has kind of shaped your thought process. And I find myself all the time too. I think it also gives you a little bit extra like situational awareness, to where like now I will avoid certain situations, almost like that fear in the back of my mind of like, I don't really like, this situation looks scary to me, or this situation is probably not the best idea for me to go there, or I don't like being in this environment right here, because maybe something would arise. I feel like jiu-jitsu has kind of given me an additional little, like, not spidey sense, but just a little extra situational awareness, because of like that reality of, if I had to fight this individual or multiple individuals, which maybe you can speak on, that's one of those, where firearm may be only a solution, just depending on your scenario, because no martial art is going to be perfect to take on multiple attackers. I know a lot of people say, XYZ, boxing, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, whatever, is the end all be all. But I don't, maybe you can speak on that. Do you think there is any martial art that I'm sure you get asked it all the time. Is there any martial art that is perfect for multiple attackers?
Yeah. Let me linger on that one thing you just said, as far as that awareness, and then we'll talk about the multiple attackers. But what jiu-jitsu does, but also other striking styles of martial arts do, that distance management, right? Distance management being one of the most vital aspects of a fight. Jiu-jitsu, the philosophy is I either want to be really close or really far away. That middle ground is where I want to avoid damage. Same thing for boxing and Muay Thai. And you start to get, like you say, a spidey sense. Like when you're sparring with someone, or you're fighting with someone, you're like, he's just a little too close. I'm going to move back a little bit, or I'm going to circle here. And I can control the grips here, but he's winning this grip battle. I'm going to break distance. I'm going to break contact. That distance management. Now that's specific to those arts, but like you said, I think it starts to hone your spidey sense a little bit more. You're like, okay, what's that guy doing there? He's a little bit, too close than normal. He's acting a little weird. I know that the main thing that is going to hurt me in any sort of fight are the hands and the limbs and extremities. What's he doing with his hands? Why is he hiding them? I think it starts to get you into that kind of mindset, or can help facilitate that. So I think that's an important part. Like you say, listening to that intuition, developing that spidey sense, and then distance management. Firearms are a tool where you can reach out and touch somebody, and that's a big advantage there. As far as any one style that can deal with multiple opponents, I haven't really seen it, consistently. As far as actual, video footage that we've had, you'll see one guy, a video of a guy just using boxing, and like knocking one dude out, then going to the other dude, knocking him out. I've also seen a video of a guy, like double legging one guy, boom, runs to the other guy, double legs, slams him, punches him once. Okay, maybe wrestling is it, I've heard, many anecdotal stories of like police officers that either I've trained with or that I know where jiu-jitsu has saved their life. And they, held a guy in half guard and was able to defend against him until backup came, or they were able to get up and escape, or they were able to use a guillotine, choke to disable someone. Not that they're always allowed to do that these days, unfortunately, but that's a whole other thing. I think there are legitimate strategies for trying to deal with multiple opponents tactically, as far as kind of how you're moving and things like that. But I think you're mostly screwed, and there's no one thing you're going to train that's going to do it all. But a firearm is going to be a big advantage in a situation like that. That's for sure.
Yeah, in most situations, you said you're kind of screwed with multiple people. It's better to avoid that situation altogether. Yes. It's nice to have, again, just like the firearm, just because you know a martial art to whatever degree, it's not a fix-all for every situation. It can help you in some situations. It can also be a detriment to you in some situation because, for example, with jiu-jitsu, like if you're fighting 5 people, I don't want to necessarily double leg someone down to the ground and just think I can sit in half guard or mount or someone's guard, you just sit there while the other 4 guys pelt me in the back of the head.
Right. And I would advocate that your jiu-jitsu is incomplete if you don't know how to not go to the ground. Right. So, everybody's like, oh, jiu-jitsu doesn't work in the street. You're just, what are you going to do? Pull guard? No, I'm not going to pull guard. I know it's the last place I want to be, but I've grappled so damn much that my stand-up grappling skills are fairly reasonable. And I'm going to be as hard as I can be to not be taken down. I'm going to utilize those skill sets and I'm going to use it to survive and get away, not to, pound someone out from the mount with multiple opponents.
Yeah, you see those memes all the time about like how different martial arts will fight, and the jiu-jitsu guy like sits butt and scoots. Definitely, I mean, I think anybody who practices, like you said, has a healthy awareness. Like you probably in those situations do not want to go to the ground, and maybe jiu-jitsu will help you prevent that. Because you do a lot of stand to ground. Like you said, if your academy is not, or your gym is not doing that, where you go live from feet to ground, or also try to get up, wrestle back up, or stand back up, or sweep to back up, something like that, then your jiu-jitsu is incomplete, or at least if you don't have some techniques in your toolbox to help you in those situations.
Yep. Yeah. We used to kind of, the philosophy was like, oh, jiu-jitsu, I'm on the bottom. I'm either going to sweep them or submit them. It should be sweep, submit, stand up, right? That's always should be something that your opponent is being threatened by, and you should be working on to have the ability to get up, disengage, whether that's to get up and now attack, or just get up and get out.
Yeah. And I'm curious, have you ever done, because we're talking, I know a lot of my viewers are firearm specific people. And I think your answer to this will be yes, but maybe I'm wrong. Do you think there is value in, especially if you're doing jiu-jitsu, to do live sparring rounds with like a dummy gun in a concealed carry position? So the reality of, if you get in a scenario where a lot of us potentially could be in, where we're concealed carrying, someone going for your gun, how to, in awkward position, actually make sure you can draw your firearm if you need to. Do you see any value in that? And have you done any of that?
I have, and I absolutely see a lot of value in it. Some things are the same, but some things change. And having the ability to retain your firearm and not have it used against you, to be able to get it out at the right time is super important. And you'll only really get the sense of that if you get down and road test it, just like we do with everything else in jiu-jitsu. Again, certain instructors will say, once the gun is in the fight, it's not necessarily just your gun, it's our gun now, right? I can, if I get it away from you, there's no rule that says, that hey, you can't use that against me. That's mine. No, it's ours, right? And what a terrible feeling that is. So whether it's just a blue dummy gun, whether you use airsoft, whether you go to a class and use simunition. I've done some of that. I want to continue to do more. I would say a few of the people that are out there doing classes really good. Craig Douglas, ShivWorks. You probably know all these guys. Paul Sharp, out of Idaho now, the Straight Blast Gym guy. He's really, really good with this. There's classes out there, and I think, I don't know how much time one needs to dedicate to it, but I think that it's important to start to be aware of that stuff. Guns and knives, both of that stuff. Knives are even scarier, I think, on the ground. But having some of that experience and knowledge is like, oh, I can't let go of his hands at all. It's really important for me to be monitoring his hands, just as, I can't be going for collar and sleeve grips and, doing all this, traditional jiu-jitsu stuff when there's ability of that weapon to come out. Burton Richardson is another one who's really, his whole JKD for the street stuff, his BJJ for the street program is really good. And I'd recommend checking out some of those guys. So I've done some of it, but there's people out there doing it at a very high level.
Yeah, I always thought it would be really cool because I know every state is different when it comes to concealed permitting, and my experience being in California, where I'm at in California, it is fairly easy to get your CCW. You have to jump through definitely more hoops than other states, 90-day waiting periods and all that stuff, and specific training requirements. I always thought it'd be interesting if someone, even through like the CCW process, just offered some sort of grappling with a dummy gun or simunition. Just because I think a lot of people I've seen it. A lot of people get false confidence when they go to get their CCW. They'll shoot their qualifying rounds, whatever, 5 rounds at 5, 7, and 10 yards. And then they won't ever train, even with their firearm. They won't shoot anymore. They won't learn how to actually draw from concealed, deal with malfunctions, reloads, anything like that. And they just think because, I took this state required hours of training course, I'm good to go. And there is just such a deep hole, even when it comes to just the firearms training aspect of it. And then you add in like, okay, what about the fighting aspect if you are carrying a concealed weapon, which sometimes will haunt my dreams. Like I'll have dreams now of like training, like kind of training jiu-jitsu or in a fight. And then I have my concealed carry and then like I'm fighting for it. I'll have these nightmares of like the holster I picked was not good. The retention wasn't good. So like the gun like flops out and then scrambling for it. Yeah, so I think there are like real world considerations that people need to think about.
Well, it's interesting you say that because that's another reason why that kind of training is important. And the reality of training some sort of martial art, I think it can be really helpful is like, when I'm concealed carrying, like I'm not, I'm older now anyway, so I'm not a hothead like I may or may not have been when I was younger, but like I'm not getting into a bar fight. I'm not getting into, some sort of random, conflict where I'm like, oh, well, this guy's talking smack, about, some issue and I'm going to fight him about it and I'm going to tackle him and take him down with a gun on me. I'm not going to do that, right? I'm backing off. Yeah. I'm accepting, whatever, man, de-escalating, walking away. But if you haven't been in those scenarios and you haven't really, either trained them or really thought about them, having the firearm and having that knowledge of what a real grappling or really a fist fight is going to be like out on the street, it makes you much less likely to get involved in that if you're thinking about it seriously.
Yeah, I have a question because I didn't know that you did a lot of like the Texas LTC stuff. What was your kind of experience when you run people through that? Did you see a lot of that where people just think, I've been shooting guns since I was 12, Papa's shotgun or whatever, rifle or 22, and now I'm going to get my concealed license and I'm just going to do what I need to do to qualify and not really go beyond that. Do you see a lot of that?
Yes, you do, unfortunately. That said, there was an interesting spectrum. You would see people who took it very seriously. You would get people who wouldn't even really understand what they were there for. They thought that they needed this to own a gun at all. So they just went and bought a gun. They had never shot it before in their life. They got it here and they're okay. I'm ready to take my test. And they kind of thought that it was instruction, that they were going to get a lesson and then a test. It's like, okay, this is a test run by the state. So you're demonstrating what you already know, right? I'll help you a little bit, but I can't load your mags for you. I can't, do this. Like, once the beeper goes off, I am just a agent of the state who's evaluating your performance. But yes, you would get people who, I shot all my life, man. But then they get up there to the line and, their bullets are either loaded backwards or I can't understand. I've never had a malfunction before. When was the last time, you lubricated your gun or
took it out of the safe?
Took it out of the safe, here after 10 years. So, and these state-run tests, as you know, are not difficult. Like, you can literally shoot the Texas LTC one, with your eyes closed. If you've shot for a while and you kind of hold it out there, it's a 3, 7, and 15 test. And so you would get people who would get perfect scores. You would get people who were barely passing. And if you're barely passing that test, I'm not super confident about how your ability to defend yourself without hurting innocent people out in public. And I think that's where a lot of this really becomes very serious, because you're defending your life, you're defending the lives of your family, or your loved ones, but are you a liability or are you an asset when you're out in public? And defending your home is one thing. When you're carrying a gun out in public and with the intent or capacity to stop an attack in wide open spaces, you're accountable for where every round ends up. And some of those people are not able at all to be accountable for those rounds. So I think that is something people need to be very aware of and take very seriously, and get the appropriate training and put in the work, because you can go to lots of classes and do all these things, but if you don't put in the work on your own, it's not gonna make a difference.
Yeah, and it's not us saying that everybody starts somewhere. Like, I'm not going to say just because someone isn't Xing every single round, putting it dead center, that they shouldn't carry. Absolutely not. Everybody starts somewhere, but I think it's just being a little bit, as you're in the firearms community, I think there are a lot of people who have inflated expectations about what their abilities really are. And I think it's just being realistic with yourself, understanding that this state mandated test is not the end all be all. Especially if, you're barely squeaking by with your qualification, you understand, like, hey, I can legally, constitutionally carry, but maybe I should actually take this a little bit more serious, understand that my abilities are not where they need to be. Not saying that you shouldn't carry, because, first and foremost, like that's your decision to make. Everybody has a right to defend their own life and their family's lives and others. But just being realistic, the same thing with jiu-jitsu, about what your capabilities really are. Like, I understand what my capabilities are. Like, if I have a smaller person who doesn't know jiu-jitsu, I might be okay. But anybody else who's bigger than me, probably has some decent training, or is a wrestler, like, I'm going to have some trouble. And the same thing with firearms. Like, I know what my capabilities are. I know that I practice, drawing from concealed and doing a lot of other stuff, clearing malfunctions, but I'm definitely not a high level shooter. Like, I have my capabilities.
Yeah. Well, what was really heartening to me through that experience is that I would have students who would come through the Texas LTC program. They would shoot, they would pass, but they would be like, "Oh, I need to do some work," and then they would sign up for private lessons, or they would take small group classes, and I would see them again and again at my range. Or I would always tell people, I was like, I don't care, train with me, train with somebody else, train somebody, but get the training, take it seriously, and go. And you could see that this was a new thing for them, and it was going to be a start of a journey for them that they were going to keep going on. And that was really exciting to see.
Yeah, I think this is a good segue to just ask you, because when I had originally interacted with you, it was very jiu-jitsu heavy. Like I said, I didn't know that you were heavily into firearms. How did you get into firearms and kind of end up where you are, what you're doing now, just so hyper focused on like competition shooting and all that, which I love seeing. It's just so interesting seeing people around you be like, oh, they are fanatics like me. Like, I'm not a weirdo.
Yeah, no, not at all. Man, I like so many Americans, young American males, American boys, I was fascinated with guns from a very young age. watching cowboy shows, with my dad growing up, Lone Ranger, Gunsmoke and stuff. But early on, my parents, they were like, we don't think guns are a great idea. We weren't really a hunting family, even though my dad did some of that growing up. But I remember I would have peanut butter sandwiches and I would chew them into shapes of guns. And then I would play with my peanut butter sandwich guns at the table. And so eventually my mom was like, all right, let's get him a toy plastic gun so he doesn't do this anymore. But I shot a little bit with my dad and my grandfather back down by the railroad tracks growing up. But it wasn't really until I got a little bit older and actually trained a bunch of martial arts. So I was probably in my mid-20s when I got my first pistol and I started to take shooting more seriously. And to me, it became an extension of self-defense. I think I was probably a purple belt at the time in jiu-jitsu, and I'd already trained, some MMA and kickboxing and stuff. But all of a sudden I was like, I'm pretty good at this stuff, but if the guy's like, I can't touch him and he's got a gun or he's got something over here, it doesn't matter what belt I'm wearing or, all this different stuff. I need to be able to defend myself and my family in a more dynamic way. And firearms for me were the answer there. That's a natural way of saying, okay, we want to, but it wasn't just something for fun now. It's like I wanted to do it, with a defensive mindset. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I would say the way that I thought was the healthiest way to train that, and because I wanted to be good at it. I didn't just want to I have this thing, I want to be good at this thing. And like the way I got into focused more on jiu-jitsu and like Thai boxing and things like that was you could compete in them. You could actually go and you could test yourself, and whether you win, you lose, whatever you learn, but you're going to actually test yourself against resisting opponents, or at least in an environment that is providing you, real feedback. And I felt that's a much healthier way to get that reality check than like going down to the bar at night and getting in a bar fight, as far as to test your martial arts ability. So you do these competitions. So as soon as I got into shooting, I'm like, yep, I want to do that. I want to get into some sort of competition. And I found these videos online of these guys shooting IDPA, which is a defensive style competitive shooting. And that was all I knew existed. But I was like, yep, I'm going to do that. And so that was kind of, I started searching for local matches and competitions and figuring out what the rules were and what gear I needed, and just dove right in.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of saw like that transition through social media. Social media is an interesting thing. Like I got to, just following you casually because of how I knew you before. And then all of a sudden I start seeing you putting up videos of you going to competitions and, the rankings and how you shot, or like, videos of you doing it live, or, prep, dry firing, things like that. And we can get into the whole dry fire. I think that's an interesting conversation in itself because people are very polarized about dry firing for whatever reason. Yeah. But it's interesting to see like how, and that's why I think you're an interesting individual, is because how hyper focused you really get on things. And like you said, you wanted to not just do it to do it. You're almost seeking your black belt, whatever equivalence that is in competition shooting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. What have you done any, I guess actually I have a better question. If someone wanted to get involved into like IDPA or USPCA, what recommendations would you really have for them? Like, as I personally don't know a whole lot about competition shooting, just, what I kind of see in the community, but I've never done it myself, never, I've thought about doing it, just with a lot of other things going on in life, just hasn't been a high priority. I've done other training things, going to courses, but never actually done the competition. Any tips or tricks or anything you would recommend for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as soon as your gun safety is in place, and, so of course we've got, our major rules of gun safety, and you kind of have those dialed in and burned into your brain. But to be aware of kind of the safety protocols they have at these matches, because the great thing is, some of the safest shooters out there are going to be competition shooters, because the safety rules are really dialed in, and if you break any of them, you're getting disqualified for the day and you're going home. And so at the least, so having the safety stuff dialed in, basically I need to be able to be aware of my muzzle at all times. I need to be able to move with my gun while keeping my finger off the trigger until I'm ready to shoot. I need to be able to draw safely, reload safely, and move around in an environment while not breaking the 180. That's a big one, where you kind of, because there's always going to be people standing behind you, participating in the match. And if you turn around and point your gun at them,
flagging everybody watching.
Yes, that's frowned upon severely. You will get disqualified and sent home. So having just an idea of what those safety rules are, maybe practicing some of them at home, that's really all you need. You don't need to be the fastest shooter. You don't need to be the most accurate shooter. All of those things are going to come with time. But the first thing is get out there and do it. Get the experience. Get that adrenaline rush where the beep goes off behind you and you're like, holy shit, I thought I knew what I was going to do, but now I completely forget where I was supposed to go. I was supposed to shoot. That's the kind of pressure that you put on yourself. And it really it just starts to get you to a higher and higher level. You have a lot of fun. You're going to make fantastic friends. And it's a really supportive community for sure. But learn the safety stuff and then get out there and do it. Don't think, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet. As long as you're safe and you can move in a controlled way, you're going to have a blast, and you're going to learn a lot.
What's your strategy for training yourself up? Because I know this is a debate kind of just within the community in general. Like, we can talk about dry firing and all that stuff, but even just a lot of people, when they think about training with your firearm, they think about going to the indoor range, standing in a lane, shooting 50 rounds at a static target. And with competitions like you do, there is a lot of movement. A lot of people don't necessarily think about even just the real world implication of, you're not going to be standing still, you're shooting a target at 5, 10, 17, whatever yards. How do you approach that? How do you approach your training with, making sure you implement your movement and all that stuff? What is your thought process with that?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, once you get the feeling of running around, safely, but running around and shooting with a gun, and not in a, static, sitting in an indoor line at a range, you'll never go back. It'll never be enough to just do that. So that is a big part of it, and I think that it adds such a big element of realism. But also, and just makes it a lot more fun. How do you train that? If you have access to an outdoor range and that lets you set up courses of fire where you can move around, that's fantastic. That's perfect. And to be at a really high level, I think you need that to search that out. Can you do a lot of that in dry fire? Absolutely. You can set up lots of targets in your basement, in your garage, in your living room, whenever the kids and wife aren't in there, and do a lot of that movement and get really creative with it. Because in the highest level guys, they are very specific in their movement, as entering positions, exiting positions, shooting on the move, transitions, all these different things that make you a much, much more efficient shooter. And, a defensive shooter might think, well, I don't need to worry about all that stuff because I don't care about a competition. I care about the real world. All right. But you should care about being efficient. You should care about being fast and accurate as quickly as possible, because, what's that one saying is, basically every gunfight is a competition, right? It's so I need to be putting accurate hits on target as rapidly as possible before the other guy puts hits on me. In these competitions, obviously no one's shooting back, but you're taking the manipulation, the speed, the accuracy, the movement, and thinking with a gun in your hand. You're taking that to the extremes of human performance as high as you possibly can.
Yeah, which I think there's a huge why I've always been interested in one day doing competitions, because it's just that extra layer of.
I'm gonna get you hooked, man. Watch out. I'm gonna get you.
I mean, we can do it. Like I said, it's just been one of those things that's been in the back of my mind, because I know that there is a lot of value in that. It's just that extra layer of bringing in. There's a lot of value to a lot of stuff, but it just brings in that extra layer of like real world implications. There's not everything competition shooting will translate into the real world, but the ability to, do it under time, under pressure, movement, having certain requirements, no hit stuff.
Yeah,
You're not supposed to hit this. You're supposed to hit this many times, throttle control, trigger control, even just safety in general. I think there's a ton of value in that. I guess maybe a follow-up question. What in your mind do you think doesn't translate well from competition to like self-defense, real world implications of defensive use?
Yeah. The first one that, people talk about is that you're not shooting back, or there's nothing shooting back at you. So it could maybe give you some sort of, overconfident mindset. And for USPSA and 3-gun types of competitions, you're not required to use cover, right? You're not required to stand behind a wall and peek out and shoot or something like that. I think there's some validity to that, but mostly, I've had an opportunity to work with some very high level shooters who are both excellent competitors, but they're also guys with, special forces and military background. And they are a big believer in training everything, but they think that competition's fantastic. And they're like, trust me, whenever somebody's shooting back at you, you're going to get behind cover. Like, you don't have to worry about that. Like, that's not something that you're going to be like, oh, well, I'll just stand out here and, take all these out in the open because that's what I did at this particular match. It's like, your survival instincts are going to kick in and you're going to do those things. I think it's important to practice those things from time to time for sure. But I don't know. I don't have any mental blocks switching from one to the other. Whenever we do, your IDPA where you can, have to shoot from behind cover, fine. I can shoot from behind cover. USPSA, I'm running and out in the open and just blazing away. I can do that. Force on force stuff, when, people are shooting simulations back at me, I get behind cover. I don't have a problem doing that. So I think it's a valid concern, but I think that the positives very much outweigh the negatives.
Yeah. Do you think there's any? I've heard this a little bit with competition shooting. A lot of people say, "Oh, at competitions, you're trying to shoot as fast as possible, as many targets as possible," and it's maybe not translates well to the real world because you don't want to maybe dump an entire mag in someone. Do you think there's any validity to that, or?
Again, I think that kind of comes down to the individual and just how much attention and self-control you have, because there's, different competitions in course of fire. You may be like, all right, there's 10 targets. Each of them have to get 3 for this one. Normally it's only 2. That's normally for most, that's the average. You put 2 in every one and you've neutralized it. But for these ones, they have to get 3, or this one has to get 6, or this one you get 2 to the body, 1 to the head, in certain ones. And for some people early on, that's really hard to keep track of. But once you've been doing this long enough, you really, I don't know. It's not a big deal. I don't know. Like, I see, like, I see a lot of cops who just mag dump, when they're in a defensive situation. And I know that level of adrenaline and that level of that's a possibility to not keep yourself in control, and you can, overkill kind of things. But I think for a civilian self-defender, you need to think about those things, right? I need to think about, okay, I'm going to stop to shoot the threat. I'm not shooting to kill. I'm not going after this person to execute them, after they've no longer become a threat. I saw a video recently that was, I think that was out of Texas, where there was, it was legally iffy as far as how the guy finished them.
Taqueria one?
I think so. Yeah. So that was problematic, but I don't think that competition is gonna hurt you or help you as far as that type of self-control or awareness. I think that's something that has to be cultivated within yourself.
Yeah, my thought, like I said, I don't have any competition experience, but my thought is you probably would have more throttle control or more awareness of because you've been there, you've been under the stressor of shooting under time and as fast as possible and being as fast and accurate as you need to be, which I think would translate well. I've never really understood the arguments about people saying, you're just learning to shoot fast and,
the people that say that you'll just shoot fast and you're not worried about accuracy, they haven't done it at a high level because at the highest level, these guys are extremely fast and extremely accurate, and that's the only way to win. They're chasing after the edge of human performance, and it's speed, but it's not just speed; it's the accuracy as well, which is amazing to watch and an amazing thing to try to achieve.
Yeah, we're going to talk. I'm sure you're going to get me addicted to. I guess how I want to wrap this up is kind of on both planes. I know you have children, and when I was training with you at the academy, every once in a while your children would come in and train with us. How important do you think it is for children to learn both jiu-jitsu and then also learn firearms? Like, how have you approached that as a father, kind of ushering them both into both worlds? And I understand, not every kid wants to do jiu-jitsu, but kind of what has been your approach?
Yeah. I know some jiu-jitsu parents or jiu-jitsu dads, like, just your kids are training jiu-jitsu no matter what. They don't have a choice. I gave them a little bit more of a choice. And so they both have trained some over the years, and enough to give them a good understanding and a little bit of confidence. I would like them to go a little bit deeper. My younger one, who's 13, is actually he's about to get back into it up here. So I'm excited about that. But in general, I think it's fantastic for kids, both for boys and for girls, just learning how your body moves, self-confidence, that bully-proofing aspect, being able to walk away from situations, but also give yourself the confidence to handle a lot of situations that can arise. It's something that I did not have growing up. I messed around with a couple kids who did Taekwondo, but I didn't have any realistic martial arts training when I was young. So there was a lot of situations where I was uncertain in that if I'd have had some real self-defense or fighting ability would have made my life easier. As far as the firearm training goes, my kids can recite the firearm safety rules, in their sleep, and they will come shoot with me from time to time. Neither one of them got the bug to really do it competitively or anything yet, which I have mixed feelings about because I kind of really want them to, but I also know that my ammo budget would be completely impossible if they get into it. But yeah, I think, again, it's not bully proofing, but it's like firearm safety proofing your kids, not whether you have guns in your house, whether they go over to a friend's house, where their parents have guns, they give them the proper respect. They know that if somebody's, pointing the gun, flagging people or something like that, that is not acceptable at all. They need to leave that situation. What to do if you find a gun, all these different things, just to demystify it, so they're not so curious about, oh, my dad's got guns, and a friend comes over, you want to go see him? It's nothing like that. I always told them, if you ever want to see my guns, if you want to handle it, just ask me. I'll come and show you. I'll show your friends, as long as it's okay with their parents. But literally, my kids are so bored with guns. It's like they just seem, because I'm constantly walking. If you want to talk about dry fire, like it's a pretty much a daily ritual with me. And they're constantly seeing me walking around, with a gun on my hip and going through the motions, whether it's in the garage or the basement or somewhere. And they're not curious at all. Yeah. they're well versed.
Which is, that's kind of where I think you want to get kids at a certain point, where it's not that mythical, cool thing like that's been sitting in the closet that we want to go look at and mess with, and it's the secretive thing that we'll do it when the parents aren't there. I think that's
Exactly.
awesome that your kids are eventually at that point where it's almost like,
Yeah.
boring.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop talking to me about guns. I don't even care, Dad.
Yeah, that's what I always said. I was like, if my kid goes over to somebody else's house and they're like, my dad's got an AR-15. You want to see? My kids will be like, no, it's boring. No.
Yeah. I guess my wrap-up question is kind of, what are your goals? Where are you headed? Because, I see you on Facebook and, you're doing your competition thing, where are your goals? What are you trying to achieve at this point?
Yeah, man. Well, I try to always have goals, write them down, and then, have specific ways that I'm going to continue to attack them. And, like you said, kind of achieving your black belt in jiu-jitsu. I'm trying to get to the grandmaster ranking in USPSA in a couple different divisions. Right now, I'm mostly focusing on the carry optics division. So that's a goal. I'd like to win a regional match for USPSA, which will take a lot of work, and maybe certain top level guys might not have to show up on that day, but I'd like to have that as a goal. I'd like to place in the top in a national competition, and then just become the best instructor that I can be. I love teaching. I love sharing all the things that I've learned. Just like with jiu-jitsu, the tiniest details, the tiniest little changes make a big difference, and being able to pass that on to other people not only helps me be more focused on those details, but it just seeing their eyes light up and having that joy and passion for them is such a great thing. So I want to take my teaching side into this as far as I can, just like I did with jiu-jitsu.
It's awesome. Yeah, I'll if it's okay with you, I'm going to leave links to your Instagram down below if anybody wants to watch.
Oh, sure.
Watch you, because I know you put up stuff of you shooting and some little instructional stuff. I would love it if you did more of that for my own selfish, because if I know someone and I trust, for information.
Yeah.
And like I said, the reason why I brought you on is because there are people out there in the world who are very interesting, but they maybe don't do content creation stuff. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know why I have an audience, because I don't feel like I'm very unique when I look at people like you with a lot of in-depth experience in multiple different things that's very valuable to the community. So I would love to push you to do more content, but I would gladly, link to your stuff so people can find you and watch the stuff that you're doing, and also get instruction from you, because I think you're a valuable asset to the community for sure.
Well, thank you so much, man. I'm trying my best, and man, you're doing amazing work, and it's really cool to see you putting your strengths to support the shooting community and our country in general.
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess inside baseball, me and Jeff, I think the last time I actually talked to you in person was the day right before I flew back to California. I just I got married Friday, graduated from law school Saturday. I think I went to the gym real quick, dropped some stuff off. I think some magazines, some mags for a Glock and some ammo and stuff.
Yeah.
And flew out the next morning. It was like, hey, I got to go. Bye. It's been awesome to talk with you and kind of catch up and talk about cool stuff we didn't know we had in common.
I know. I've just seen your face on the YouTube, your YouTube Armed Scholar channel. And I'm just like, I know that guy. That guy's awesome.
Yeah, that's happened a lot. A lot of people will be like, hey, even to my wife, I'm like, hey, your husband does YouTube? I had no idea, because I don't like to tell a lot of people. I which is hard now at this point, but I always try to keep it close knit. So yeah, no, I'll definitely link to your stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, my audience, and like I said, I think you have a lot of unique insight that is very valuable to the community. So however I can support you, I'd love to do it. But thank you again for coming on.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And if you want to, explore the competition shooting scene or anything like that, just let me know. And you can come out here to Indiana in the middle of when it warms up a little bit. Don't come right now, but come out to Indiana. We'll do some shooting, and we'll get you rocking and rolling.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, guys. Thank you to everybody who's listening. Next week's podcast, not really sure what we're going to be talking about, but I'll update you guys. So thank you again to Jeff for coming on. And as always, never forget, this nation was built by arm scholars, and this nation will be maintained by arm scholars.